I had spent 14 years building that house into a home. Every corner of it had my fingerprints on it. The yellow curtains I picked out on our 3rd anniversary, the garden I planted one summer weekend while Marcus watched football and pretended to help. The chipped tile near the front door that we always said we would fix but never did. That house was not just walls and a roof. It was the physical proof that my marriage had been real. So when I came home from my mother's funeral on a cold Tuesday in November and found a woman standing in my kitchen, holding a glass of my wine, I thought I was dreaming. She turned slowly when she heard me come in. She was not startled. She was not embarrassed. She was calm in a way that told me she had been expecting this moment. "You must be Claire," she said. I set my bag down on the floor. "I live here," I said. She tilted her head slightly, like I had said something that needed correcting. "Not anymore," she replied. "My name is Claire Donovan. I was 41 years old when my husband tried to steal the life I had built. I had married Marcus Donovan 11 years earlier in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside of Austin, Texas. We had been good together at the beginning, or at least I had believed we were. He was charming and easy to be around, and he had a way of making ordinary evenings feel like something worth remembering. But I was the one who kept things running. I was the one who managed the finances, tracked the mortgage, filed the taxes, reviewed the insurance, and made sure every account balanced at the end of every month. Marcus worked in commercial lending. He brought in decent money. But I was the quiet engine behind everything we owned. I had also inherited a modest but significant amount when my grandmother passed, $112,000, which I put directly into the down payment on our home in Cedar Falls, a quiet neighborhood where the streets were named after trees and the neighbors waved at you from across the yard. That house sat on Birchwood Lane. I chose it. I paid for most of it. And I had never once thought I needed to protect it from my own husband. 2 men I did not recognize were carrying my dining chairs across the living room when I stepped further inside that Tuesday evening. They were not talking, just working, like this was any ordinary job. "Excuse me," I said sharply. Neither of them stopped moving. The woman stepped forward from the kitchen. She was tall, wearing a fitted blazer, her dark hair pulled back neatly. She looked like someone who had prepared for this moment, down to the outfit. "My name's Vivian," she said. "I think we need to talk." She reached into a large bag sitting on my kitchen counter, and pulled out a folder. She held it out to me without apology. My hands were steady as I took it. They would not stay that way. Inside were property transfer documents, my address, the legal description of the house on Birchwood Lane, the lot number, the county registration, and at the bottom, where my name should have been, where my name had always been, was hers. Vivian Crane. I read it 3 times. Each time, the letters stayed exactly the same. "This is a mistake," I said quietly. But even as I said it, something cold was crawling up the back of my neck. I heard his key in the lock before I heard his voice. Marcus walked in from the garage like a man arriving at a place he already owned. He was wearing his gray jacket, the one I had bought him 2 Christmases ago, and he did not look surprised to see me standing in the middle of the living room holding the folder. He looked irritated. "Claire," he said, in the same tone he used when I asked him twice about something he had already decided. "Tell me this is a mistake," I said. He exhaled. Actually exhaled, like I was the problem. "I was going to tell you this week," he said. "I just needed to sort out the transition first." "The transition," I repeated. "You've been at your mother's for 3 weeks. I needed to move forward." Move forward. Those 2 words landed in my chest like stones dropped into still water. "The house is mine, Marcus. Half of it was paid with my inheritance. My name is on the deed." He glanced at Vivian, and something passed between them, a look I recognized immediately. The look of 2 people who have already had a conversation about you and reached a conclusion. "You'll want to get a lawyer," he said. And he walked past me down the hallway. I left the house that night with 1 bag. I sat in my car at the end of Birchwood Lane for a long time, engine off. The streetlights were doing their quiet, orange work. Someone's dog was barking 3 houses down. Everything was exactly the same as it always was on that street, and nothing was the same at all. I did not cry. That surprised me. I had cried at my mother's funeral, quietly, with my hand over my mouth. I had cried when I was 17 and my first relationship ended. I had cried at a movie once, which Marcus had teased me about for months afterward. But sitting in that car, I felt something very different from sadness. I felt the first edges of clarity. There is a particular kind of stillness that comes when you realize the situation you are in is not just painful, it is also deeply, provably wrong. And wrong things can be corrected. Wrong things leave evidence. I had spent 11 years managing every financial detail of our life together. I knew exactly what we owned, what we owed, and what paper trail led where. The question was not whether Marcus had made a mistake. The question was how large that mistake actually was. I drove to my friend Tanya's house. Tanya Mercer had been my best friend since college. She was an accountant with a sharp mind and almost no patience for dishonesty in any form. Marcus had always described her as a lot. What he really meant was that she could see through him, and she never pretended otherwise. I called from the driveway. She came outside before I even knocked. She took one look at me and said, "Come inside and tell me everything." So I did. I told her about Vivian standing in my kitchen, the folder, the property transfer documents, Marcus arriving and showing no regret whatsoever, the two men carrying my chairs. The way he had said transition like our 11-year marriage was a minor item on his calendar. Tanya did not speak until I was finished. Then she said, "He transferred the deed while you were out of state burying your mother." "Yes," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "That is not just betrayal," she said slowly. "That is fraud." I nodded. "He used your absence as a window," she continued. "He planned this." "I know," I said. "Then we need to plan too," she replied. She got up, opened her laptop, and started writing a list. The first thing Tanya told me was to document everything before touching anything. She sat beside me at her kitchen table as I went through photos on my phone. Every room of that house I had taken over the years for insurance purposes, showing the furniture, the improvements, the upgrades I had paid for personally. The kitchen renovation in year 6. The hardwood floors we had replaced in year 8. My garden. The second thing she told me was not to contact Marcus again that night. "He is waiting for you to be emotional," she said. An emotional response gives him control of the next conversation. She was right. I knew she was right. The third thing she told me was to call an attorney first thing in the morning, not just any attorney but a family law attorney who also understood real estate and fraud. She had a name. Patricia Okafor. She handled a property dispute for a colleague of mine, Tanya said. She is methodical, experienced, and she does not lose her composure. I wrote the name down. Then Tanya poured 2 glasses of water, pushed one toward me, and said, "You are not going to let him keep that house." It was not a question. It was a statement of what was going to happen next. Patricia Okafor's office was on the 9th floor of a building downtown. I was there at 8:15 the following morning, 15 minutes before they officially opened. Her assistant let me in anyway. Patricia herself arrived at 8:22, looked at me sitting in the waiting area, and said simply, "Come in." She was a compact woman in her 50s with close-cut hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her desk was organized in a way that told you she valued precision over impressiveness. She sat down, placed her hands flat on the desk, and said, "Tell me." I told her everything. I did not rush it, and I did not minimize it. I told her about the house on Birchwood Lane, my grandmother's inheritance, my name on the original deed, the property transfer documents Vivian had shown me, and Marcus's calm, deliberate response when I confronted him. Patricia listened without writing anything down. She had the look of someone collecting pieces in a very specific order. When I finished, she said, "Did you sign any documents in the past 6 months that you did not read in full?" The question landed like a weight. I closed my eyes. And I remembered. It had been a Thursday evening in August, 10 weeks before my mother passed. I had just come home from a difficult day at work. I managed accounting for a mid-sized logistics firm, and we had been deep in a quarterly audit that had stretched my patience to its edges. I was tired, and I was already thinking about dinner. Marcus was sitting at the kitchen table with a small stack of papers. "Refinancing documents," he said, without looking up. "The bank needs your signature before Friday." I had asked him if it was the usual process. He said yes. I had asked if anything was changing. He said no, just locking in a better interest rate. I signed where he pointed. I did not read them. I had trusted him completely. Sitting in Patricia's office the following morning, I heard myself saying this out loud, and it sounded different than it had felt in the moment. In the moment, it had been ordinary. A tired wife trusting her husband with a routine task. Said aloud to an attorney, it sounded like exactly what it was. An opening. One he had created deliberately and waited for patiently. Were those the transfer documents? I asked. Patricia looked at me steadily. Very likely, she said. We need to get copies. Patricia submitted a formal request to the County Property Records Office that same day. She also connected me with a forensic document examiner named Howard Briggs. He was retired, methodical, and had spent 22 years working real estate fraud cases before going private. Patricia said she trusted his eye above almost anyone else's. I gave Howard everything I had, copies of the original deed, the mortgage documents from when we first purchased the house, and the folder that Vivian had handed me the night before. He called me 2 days later. The signatures on the transfer documents match your signature, he said carefully. But I want you to look at something. He sent me a zoomed-in comparison image. On the original deed from 11 years ago, my signature had a particular small loop at the end of the C in Claire, a habit I had developed in college and never lost. It was tiny and consistent across every legal document I had ever signed. On the transfer documents, the loop was missing. It was close, very close, but it was not there. That is not your signature, Howard said simply. I exhaled so sharply that I had to put my hand over my mouth. He continued. Someone practiced, but they did not get the loop. Patricia moved quickly once Howard confirmed the forgery. She filed an emergency petition with the county court to freeze any further transfers of the property at 14 Birchwood Lane. Within 48 hours, a temporary injunction was granted. Marcus could not sell the house, take out loans against it, or make any additional legal changes to the title until the matter was fully resolved in court. He called me the morning after the injunction was served. His tone had changed entirely. Gone was the flat, dismissive voice from the night I came home. This was a softer voice, careful, measured, a little too friendly. Claire, I think we are both handling this badly, he said. I am not handling it at all yet, I replied. My attorney is. A pause. There is no reason this has to become a legal battle. We can work something out. An arrangement that is fair to both of us. An arrangement, I said. You keep the contents of the house. I keep the property. You get a generous settlement. I said nothing for a moment. Then, Marcus, you forged my signature on a property transfer document. Another pause. Longer this time. That is a very serious accusation, he said. Yes, I agreed. It is. I ended the call. It was Tanya who told me to dig into the finances. Not just the obvious accounts, the joint checking, the mortgage, the savings, but everything. The small transactions. The patterns over time. The places money goes when someone is trying to hide where it is going. I had always managed our household accounts, which meant I had full access. That was something Marcus had likely not thought through carefully enough. I went back 18 months, and what I found made my hands go cold. There were hotel charges in cities Marcus had claimed to visit for work, but on dates that did not match any conference or client meeting I could find records of. There were restaurant charges for 2 people on evenings he had told me he was working late. There was a recurring monthly transfer of $1,400 to an account I did not recognize, labeled simply PM Consulting. PM Consulting. I cross-referenced the amount against our tax records. It did not appear anywhere. I searched the name through the Texas Business Registry. PM Consulting LLC was registered 18 months ago. The registered agent was Vivian Crane. He had been paying her rent, with money from our joint account, for a year and a half. I printed every page and put them in a folder. Patricia reviewed the financial records the following afternoon. She was quiet for a long time, going through each page carefully, using small sticky tabs to mark certain transactions. When she reached the PM Consulting transfers, She placed 2 tabs instead of 1. "This is marital waste," she said finally. I asked her to explain. She told me that when one spouse secretly uses joint marital funds to benefit a person they are having an affair with, paying rent, gifts, travel, living expenses, the court treats it as a misuse of shared assets. It is called dissipation of marital property. And in Texas, a state that divides marital assets equitably, it is taken seriously. The total transferred over 18 months, Patricia said, is approximately $25,200. She looked at me over her reading glasses. "That comes back to you." She then explained that combined with the forged transfer documents, the fraudulent signature, and the attempt to remove me from the deed on a property I had partially funded with inherited money, which Texas law treats as separate property unless it was commingled, we had a strong, well-documented case. "How strong?" I asked. She placed her hands flat on the desk again. "He is going to wish he had never made that call to the property office," she said. I had been quiet about all of this. No calls to mutual friends. No posts anywhere. No emotional confrontations. Nothing that could be used to paint me as unstable or vindictive. Marcus, apparently, had not been as careful. Tanya called me one evening with an edge in her voice that I recognized immediately. "He is telling people you abandoned the marriage," she said. "That you were emotionally unavailable. That you spent the last 2 years more invested in your career than in him." I asked how she knew. "Because Kevin Marsh told his wife, who told me," she said. "Kevin was a colleague of Marcus's. He is building a story, Claire. Getting ahead of whatever he thinks is coming." I was not surprised. But what Tanya said next was, "He also told Kevin that the house was always more his than yours. That you contributed very little financially." I sat with that for a moment. Then I thought about the $112,000 wire transfer receipt sitting in a folder in Patricia's office. I thought about 11 years of tax returns where my income was in most years higher than his. I thought about the mortgage statements where my name appeared first. Let him build his story, I thought. I had the documents. 2 weeks after the injunction was granted, something unexpected happened. Vivian posted a video online. I do not know what she was thinking. Perhaps she believed the matter would resolve itself quietly. Perhaps she genuinely did not understand the seriousness of what she was holding, a house she had received through a forged document from a man who had spent joint marital funds on her for 18 months. Or perhaps she simply wanted to celebrate. The video was a short clip. She was walking through the house, narrating cheerfully. "Morning light in here is just gorgeous," she said, passing through the living room. "Wait until you see the kitchen." The comments were full of people admiring the space. I watched it once, and I noticed something. In the background, on the kitchen counter, partially visible behind a fruit bowl, was a small locked metal document box. Dark green with a silver clasp. I knew that box. Marcus used it to store originals, original contracts, receipts, personal notes. He had kept it for years. He had always been secretive about its contents. I had seen it on the kitchen counter on the night I came home to find Vivian there. And now it was in her video. I forwarded the video to Patricia immediately. Patricia submitted a formal discovery request that included the metal document box. Marcus's attorney objected. Patricia was not deterred. She filed a motion arguing that the box potentially contained documents material to the fraud allegation, specifically originals of the property transfer papers, communications related to the forged signature, and any documentation of the PM consulting arrangement. The judge agreed. The box was to be produced. Marcus called me again when the order came through. This time, there was no softness in his voice at all. "You are making an enemy out of me," he said. "You made an enemy out of me first," I replied. "You just did not expect me to notice." He told me I was being vindictive, that I was dragging out a process that could be handled reasonably between 2 adults, that going after the box was an invasion of his private records. "Private records you kept in my house," I said. He had no answer for that. I told him that I hoped he had been truthful in everything he had stored in that box, because we were all about to find out. Then I ended the call. I had stopped letting his voice take up space in my chest. Every time he called, I felt a little less of the thing that had once made me want to make him happy. The box was produced 3 days before the preliminary court hearing. Patricia and I sat together in her office as her paralegal photographed each item inside, one by one, creating a documented record. Most of it was what I expected: insurance papers, old car titles, a copy of Marcus's original employment contract from 9 years ago. But near the bottom, in a plain white envelope, was a single sheet of paper. Patricia read it first. She placed it down on the desk and turned it so I could read it too, and her expression was very careful and very still. It was handwritten. Marcus's handwriting, which I would have recognized anywhere. The way his TS crossed too far to the right, the way his lowercase letters leaned forward. It was a plan, a timeline, essentially, dated 14 months earlier. It outlined the steps he intended to take, moving Vivian into a more permanent arrangement, transferring the property before C, returns from TX situation, refinancing under new title, and at the bottom, 2 words circled twice. Clean exit. 14 months. He had been planning this for 14 months. I read those 2 words, clean exit, and I felt something leave me. Not grief. Not anger. Just the last of any remaining confusion. Patricia presented the handwritten plan at the preliminary hearing. Marcus's attorney tried to argue it was private, that it was speculative, that it proved nothing. The judge reviewed it and allowed it into evidence. The handwriting was consistent. The timeline matched the documented transactions. The phrase before C, returns from TX situation, aligned precisely with the dates of my mother's illness and passing. He had used my grief as a clock. He had waited for the moment I would be furthest away, most distracted, and most emotionally depleted, and he had moved then. I sat in that courtroom, and I thought about my mother's last days. I had been at her bedside. I had held her hand. I had arranged everything: the hospice, the paperwork, the service. I had done it alone because Marcus had said work was demanding and he would join me when he could. He had never come, and I now understood why. He had been busy with the transition. The judge looked at the evidence with the steady expression of someone who has seen human behavior in its worst forms and is no longer shocked by it. Then she looked at Marcus's attorney. "Your client has significant exposure here," she said. It was not a question. Marcus's attorney requested a settlement conference the following week. I was prepared for this. Patricia had warned me it would happen. She said it was the move of a man who has seen the case against him clearly and no longer believes he can win at trial. We sat across a conference table, Patricia and I on one side, Marcus and his attorney on the other. I had not been in the same room as Marcus since the night I left the house on Birchwood Lane. He looked tired, slightly smaller than I remembered, in the way that people sometimes look when you stop admiring them. His attorney opened with an offer. Marcus would relinquish the property dispute if I agreed not to pursue criminal fraud charges and if I signed a mutual release on all financial claims. Patricia did not blink. "That is not a starting point," she said. "That is a request for your client to be rescued." We countered. I wanted the house restored to my name as sole owner. I wanted full restitution of the $25,200 in marital funds directed to Vivian Crane's account. I wanted all legal fees covered. And I wanted a signed, notarized acknowledgement of the fraudulent transfer. Marcus's attorney looked at him. Marcus looked at the table. The negotiations lasted 4 hours. At several points, Marcus's attorney stepped out to make calls. At one point, Marcus himself asked for a short break. He came back looking like a man who had received news he already knew was coming, but had hoped would somehow not arrive. By the end of the afternoon, Marcus agreed to almost everything. The house would be transferred back to my name, sole ownership, fully documented, recorded with the county within 10 business days. The $25,200 in marital fund dissipation would be repaid to me within 60 days. Legal fees would be split, with Marcus covering the larger share given the circumstances of the fraud finding. The acknowledgement of the fraudulent transfer would be signed and notarized before we left the building that day. In exchange, I agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the forgery, a decision I made not out of mercy, but out of practicality. I wanted this finished cleanly. I wanted the house. I did not want to spend the next 18 months in a criminal proceeding. Patricia walked me through the final documents methodically. I read every page. Every single one. And when I signed, I knew exactly what I was signing. That was something he could never say. Vivian was served with a separate civil notice the following morning. She had knowingly accepted a property transfer for a home she did not purchase, did not have any legal claim to, and had moved into while I was attending my mother's funeral. Patricia's assessment was that she had enough exposure to make things very uncomfortable for herself if she chose to contest anything. She did not contest. She vacated Birchwood Lane within 2 weeks of the settlement. I was told by my neighbor, Pat Ellison, that she left on a Wednesday morning with 3 large moving boxes and did not look back. Pat had known something was wrong from the beginning, but had not known how to say anything. She called me that Wednesday evening, apologetic and relieved. "I should have called you sooner," she said. "You did not know what you were looking at," I told her. The house sat empty for those 2 weeks. I did not go inside until the transfer was officially re-recorded with the county. I wanted the paperwork done before I crossed the threshold again. I wanted to walk back in as the legal owner, not as a woman hoping things had been resolved. There is a difference. That difference mattered to me more than I can easily explain. The day the county recording came through, Patricia called me at 9:47 in the morning. "It is done," she said. "The deed reflects your name, sole ownership. It is official." I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building and said nothing for a moment.
"Claire," she said.
"I heard you," I said. "Thank you." I drove to Birchwood Lane after work. I parked in the same spot I had always used. I walked up the path that I had laid the edging stones on 4 summers ago, on a hot July weekend when Marcus was away at a golf trip. I had done it by myself with a YouTube tutorial and sore knees, and a satisfaction that I remembered now very clearly. I unlocked the front door with my key. The house was cold. It smelled like absence, that particular flat smell of rooms that have not been lived in. But the bones of it were the same. The yellow curtains were gone. Vivian had taken them or thrown them out. But the chipped tile near the front door was exactly where it had always been. I knelt down and touched it. And I cried. Finally. Not from sadness. From the release of something I had been holding tightly for weeks. The house was mine. I did not hear from Marcus directly after the settlement. His attorney handled the remaining logistics. The notarized acknowledgement was delivered to Patricia's office on a Thursday. The $25,200 restitution payment arrived by wire transfer on a Monday, 53 days after the settlement was signed. Patricia confirmed receipt and sent me the documentation. Tanya came over that evening with takeout and a bottle of good wine, and we sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen table in my house, and she said, "Tell me how you feel." I thought about it honestly. "I feel like I was in a car accident that someone else caused," I said, "and now I have finished all the insurance paperwork and the car is fixed and I can drive again." She laughed. "That is the least romantic description of winning I have ever heard." "I did not want romance," I said. "I wanted the house." I heard later, through Tanya's extended network of mutual acquaintances, that Vivian had ended things with Marcus shortly after vacating the property. Apparently, the house had been a significant part of what she had expected from the arrangement. Without it, and with the legal exposure still fresh, she had moved on. I was not surprised. I had seen her face that night when she first handed me the folder. Even then, I think she had known. 3 months after the settlement, I started repainting. The kitchen first. I chose a warm cream color that I had bookmarked on my phone over a year earlier, but never committed to because Marcus had preferred the existing color. I painted it on a Saturday morning with the radio on and the back door open to the yard, and it took me most of the day and looked exactly the way I had imagined. Then I painted the bedroom. Then the hallway. I replaced the yellow curtains with white linen ones that let the morning light through in a way that made the living room feel like somewhere worth sitting. I had the chipped tile by the front door fixed, not because I had to, but because I chose to. That distinction felt important. Every decision I made in that house from that point forward was mine alone. There was no one to consult, no one to negotiate with, no one to veto the color on the wall. It was a quieter life than I had expected, but it was honest. I went back to Patricia's office one afternoon to drop off a signed release she needed. As I was leaving, she walked me to the elevator. "How are you?" she asked. Not as a formality, Better than I expected, I said. And I meant it. There is something I want to say about all of it now, from the other side. I did not win because I was clever. I won because Marcus was careless in the specific way that dishonest people often are. He assumed that the person he was deceiving would behave like someone who had been defeated. He assumed I would be too emotional, too grieving, too exhausted to look closely at anything. He did not know me as well as he thought he did. And that was his most expensive mistake. The house on Birchwood Lane is still mine. I wake up there every morning and drink my coffee in the kitchen with the cream walls and the white linen curtains, and I do not think about Marcus much at all. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Just with the mild, clear-eyed recognition that some chapters end and other chapters begin. I think about my grandmother sometimes. The inheritance she left me that paid for this roof over my head. I think she would have understood all of it. The patience, the documentation, the refusal to let someone else define what I was entitled to. The house was never just a house. It was the proof that I had built something real. And unlike some people in this story, I never needed to forge a signature to claim it. It was already mine.